We're now just days away from England's opener in Euro 2020. Ahead of it, their friendly games have been marred by some fans booing the players when they take a knee before kick-off. Gareth Southgate, understandably concerned, says we accept that there might be an adverse reaction, but we're going to ignore that and move forward. I think those people should put themselves in the shoes of those young players and how they must feel. In essence, people are booing their own team. I don't really understand that. Well, joining me now to discuss this topic, we have Nedum Onuoha, Alexis Nunes, we also have Shaka, Hislop and Mark Ogden as well. Shaka, I'll start with you. Let's just recap as to why the English players and players in English football have been taking a knee before games.
Well, it started roughly a year ago, just after the death of George Floyd here in the US, and albeit an ocean away from what's happening in English football, it sparked a global calling for the recognizing of black lives and the equality of all of us, regardless of our differences. Football responded in recognizing what the world was asking for, what the world was having to endure and witness during the course of that pandemic when we were all indoors. Players started taking a knee as that became a universal symbol for that call for equality, and it continues. It's been hugely valuable, not just in highlighting the issues, but in initiating conversations, in addressing those issues. Football felt that it was right for them to continue taking the knee, and then even as players started coming back into stadium, or fans started coming back into stadiums, you saw this adverse reaction to it. And while a lot of the focus has been on the booing and the adverse reaction, as I phrased it, I look at the response of the majority of fans who come out to games, who are determined to drown that out, determined to do their own part in recognizing the best of who we are. So while this is a topic that we will discuss and debate, I take real pleasure in seeing how the no longer silent majority has reacted.
Yeah, well, let's hear this from Kick It Out's Troy Townsend, reiterating it's not a political statement. He says taking a knee was a gesture chosen by the players as a stance for greater racial equality in football. It's important to reiterate that they have said explicitly that it was not intended to be connected to any specific political movement. Nedum, how do you think these players are feeling having their own fans boo them ahead of a game?
Yeah, to be honest, I think it must be very tough. I spoke with one of the players today, and he said he was shocked because for those guys who are doing that, they do believe that they're doing the right thing, and they're doing it in a way which shouldn't really cause controversy. Because as we've sort of alluded to there, for the past year, people have had to be unequivocal in describing the reasons for doing exactly what they're doing. And, you know, even still, they're still having to, be questioned about it now. So when they go out there and they try and make a statement, try and show a unified message for something which objectively feels good, why should you be booed? You know, you've not done anything detrimental to the nation, to those groups of fans, but you're being booed for it. And I think for lots of them, they're left in a position whereby they're asking the question, well, why are they booing? Because we've explained multiple times, this is why we're doing it. So why do they still boo us now? And ultimately, I think there aren't enough microphones which are being put in the faces of the people who boo. Because very quickly, if they say something like, well, it's because they're aligned with this movement, it's political. Well, if somebody just says, just a quick fact check and says, no, that's not what it is, I bet there's no other line of the sort of argument for those people. And it's a shame because I don't think those players deserve that type of treatment. And, you know, these are guys who are honoured to play for their country, but then they also understand their platform as well. And I think the fact that all of those guys are good enough to be able to go out there and try and make it a greater good for as many people as possible, you know, that isn't a problem. So it's a shame to see. And the sad thing is, you know, I'm like Mark in the fact that I saw a few games towards the end of the season. There's this thing in the back of your mind where you kind of expect it. But that's wrong, because for me, what you're seeing on the field is something which should be praised. And I think all those guys, to give them credit, this generation of England players who understand their social impact, you know, I think they should be praised. But instead, you know, they're being booed by a few, and unfortunately, you know, ends up being a talking point. Yeah,
of course. And as you say, it is a few. And obviously, as Shaka was saying, that there's a big group of people who are also supporting the players taking the knee. But Alexis, not just the England games, is it? Because you've been at the FA Cup final this season. You've heard those boos yourself there.
Yeah, exactly. We were at the FA Cup final game. And honestly, I was really taken aback by it because the boos were absolutely loud. And I remember I just put my head down because I didn't want to put a face to these boos because, I mean, Shaka can attest to it, Nedum can attest to it. Like, we've all had experiences with racism, and in the last year where we've seen so many improvements, especially in football, and we felt that we have even done stuff here at ESPN to try and educate people, to try and, as you would say, bring the horse to the water and almost force him to drink and understand why these players are doing this and why it affects us as people so horribly. It's shocking to see just the blatant ignorance and just the unwillingness for people to accept it. I was just in an Uber today and hearing on the radio, they were talking about it, and just random people, fans were calling in, and so many of them were saying that, well, this is just an American thing, why do we have to bring it over here? Or it's a political thing, players should really just carry on playing the game. And there's such an unwillingness to sit down and really learn about why these players are doing this. And as Nedum said, he spoke to a player today. I've spoken to quite a few, some of which are going to play for England this weekend, some who have played in the Premier League and the Championship. And I think what they told me too, one of them said he was genuinely surprised, at least at the booing in the friendlies, because in the Premier League, maybe they wanted to think, okay, it's two opposing teams, it's clubs. But there's something special about putting on a shirt to represent your country. And there's something unifying with that. And it feels like it unites everybody, no matter what color they are. And yet here they are, booing their own players, booing players like Marcus Rashford, who 45 minutes later scores a penalty, and all of a sudden everyone's out buying his shirt. And nobody, and the players just cannot seem to fathom that. In my case, I think of Jamaica, and there's a ton of players who are born and raised overseas that play for Jamaica. But when they put on that Jamaica shirt, I'm like, right, you're one of our own. I don't care where you were born. And I think that's so hard for the players to grasp. You could see them looking around, and I shudder to think how they must have felt going back home, putting their heads on a pillow, going to sleep, knowing that their own people are booing them for daring to stand up against racism.
Yeah, it's bewildering, isn't it? I mean, Mark, do you think this could be a distraction going forward? Because Alexis mentioned there as well that some are saying this is an American thing, this taking the knee, but we've seen racist tweets. We've seen that this is still very important, what these players are doing, what these players are calling for. Do you think it could end up being a distraction throughout the Euros for the England team?
Well, I don't think it's a secret that there's an obnoxious, ignorant element to the England support, and there has been for a long time, whether it's racism, whether it's, the way that they behave with the national anthems of opposition teams, the way they chant about, Irish history, the way they chant about the Pope. This isn't just purely related to what we've seen at the weekend. But for me, this vocal minority of people, spouting this thing, it's a Marxism, left-wing movement, that these are just phony excuses. And I think the England team, Gareth Southgate and the players, I think they're fed up of having to explain themselves. I think that is the issue. So it is a distraction that every press conference they're being asked about this. And, Gareth Southgate, the players have made it absolutely abundantly clear this is not a political message. This is about players, teammates wanting to stand side by side in support of players who, such as Raheem Sterling, Marcus Rashford, Kyle Walker, who've been on the end of racism, whether it's in stadiums, online. It's purely footballers standing up for the mates, the teammates. So this element of supporters that suggest that it's being, phrases like rammed down their throats, it's an absolute nonsense. So it is a distraction. And, football supporters are supposed to be the 12th man, the extra help that gets them over the line. Well, that isn't the case with England. The England fans like to pride themselves on being some of the best supporters in the world. So, they do travel well. But in this instance, they're not the best supporters in the world. They can be quite difficult to be around. I was at a game in Germany in 2017. It was Lucas Podolski's farewell game for Germany, and the England fans booed throughout the national anthem, the German national anthem, and sang songs about the Second World War and the First World War and RAF bombers and German bombers. It was horrendous, and this is just an extension of that. This lack of education, I guess, of some of the people that watch in England that believe that this is the right thing to do. It's hard to explain. It really is, and it's very hard to justify. But this is something that football fans that follow the England team, there is a minority that constantly let the team down, let the country down.
Shaka, as Nedum mentioned, it is the highest honour to play for your national side. These players should not have to be going into games with this in their mind, should they?
No, they shouldn't. They absolutely shouldn't. And I think it's it's detesting that they have to deal with this from a group of their own fans, and they hear it, and they're put off and set back by it. Yes, representing your country is the highest honor there is in the game, but then when for all the pride that you feel in pulling on the shirt, in wearing your national team's colours, to then feel that you are representing a section of that population, of that fan base, even if it is a minority, you're representing them when they don't believe that you are worthy of the fullest of human rights. You are worthy of being called equal to them and others who you share the football field with. And that is a really tough kind of duality to live, where you are giving of yourself, giving everything of yourself in representing a country that some people don't think you are even worthy of that redress, and it's dispiriting to witness.
Thanks so much for watching ESPN on YouTube, and for more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app, and for premium content and live streaming, subscribe to ESPN Plus.